afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to ace GMAT reading comprehension. My name is Rajat Sidana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your co-host today. Along with me, we have Payal Tandon, who's the other co-founder of e-GMAT, and she's going to be our main host today. Supporting us in this webinar, we have Shraddha, who's a subject matter expert at e-GMAT, as well as Sandeep, who's a GMAT strategy expert. In this webinar, we'll talk about how you can improve comprehension, or the key reading strategies that you should master to improve comprehension. There's a notion in the larger GMAT world that to ace GMAT reading comprehension, you need to be a voracious reader. You need to read lots and lots of books, magazines such as The Economist, etc. And what we've found with our research is acing reading comprehension is simply about following certain reading strategies and understanding how these passages are written and making sure that you apply these strategies to improve comprehension. In this webinar, we'll demonstrate what those strategies are, and then we'll also show you how to apply them into smaller but complex or other smaller but dense paragraphs. Now, in GMAT reading comprehension, there are very few concepts that you need to learn. And one of the concepts that you do need to learn is the concept of main point. And to make sure that you guys are well versed with it, we did send these two video lessons your way. One was main point 1 and the other one was main point 2. If you have not gone through these lessons, they are a part of your free trial. Just go through them by logging into your e-GMAT account. We also have some upcoming free sessions. We have a free proctored mock test that we call as a quant workshop. That's tomorrow, so 24 hours from now. In this workshop, we give you a series of mini mock tests, and the purpose of these mini mocks is to first estimate what your current score is, and then to tell you where should you focus on and how much should you focus on to go from whatever your current estimate of quant score is to your target quant score. So let's say if you want to go from a Q44 to Q50, we'll tell you which are the key areas where you still need emphasis and how much time should you put in over there. We'll also tell you the key reasons why you are at Q44. Most often it is not the conceptual knowledge, but certain faltering points that are certain areas where you falter again and again, and we'll give you those insights in this workshop. We also have a free critical reasoning webinar, which is next Saturday, a week from now. In this webinar, we talk about how can you pre-think assumptions. So pre-thinking, one of the most important core skills that you need to learn if you want to get to a 90 percentile on GMAT critical reasoning, and we teach you that skill over here as well. Again, this webinar comes with a number of video lessons that build that foundation in arguments as well as assumptions so that you're well prepared for this webinar. Okay, so this is a free webinar. We have a number of students who are attending this webinar, and to make sure we understand this group as a whole, we ask these two leading questions. One is, when do you plan to take the test? And based on the data that I really see, we have 4 almost equally sized groups and then 1 large group that has more than 60 days before their test. Now, the good news is, if you apply these reading strategies, you'll see an impact on your reading comprehension ability in as few as 5 days. So even those who have fewer than 15 days, you guys can benefit a lot from this. And then let's talk about the target GMAT score. What I really see is more than 60% are aiming for a score of 730 or higher, about 20% in that 710, 720 bucket, and about 30% in the 600 to 700 bucket. So with that, let me go into the webinar pane. The screen will have changed for you, or will be in the process of changing for you. You'd see in about another 10 to 15 seconds, depending on which part of the world you are in, a presentation which says GMAT reading comprehension, and then a question and answer pod below that. Let me give you guys another 10-15 seconds so that the screen does settle down for you. I'm going to just put in a yes no poll. If you guys can see the presentation, select yes. All right, it seems pretty much everyone can. For a couple of folks who cannot see the presentation, I just recommend that you join again. But other than that, I think pretty much everyone can see the presentation. Thank you very much. There's essentially three parts of this webinar. In the first part, I'm going to do an introduction to e-GMAT. That's going to be about 15 minutes long. Then we'll go into the core of this webinar, which is when Payal would take over, and she'll talk about the key reading strategies that you need to master to ace GMAT reading comprehension. And then towards the end, if there are still questions that you haven't answered, I would recommend, so we'll have this open-ended Q&A in which you can ask those questions, and we'll be happy to answer those. Also, if you have questions about other aspects of GMAT preparation, so aspects which don't relate to reading comprehensions, aspects that may be related to other parts of verbal, quant, or in general about an MBA application, we'll be happy to answer those in this third part of the webinar, which is the open-ended Q&A over here. So I asked this question, what's your target GMAT score? And you know, upwards of 60% of you are aiming for a score of 730 or higher. While that is the case overall, what I can tell you is statistically, only 6% of the people get to that score. And this is despite the fact that the median scores at top B schools keep on going up. And this is data from the year 2018. Now, what is it that a good number of people who get to that score of 720 or higher do? They work with us. A good percentage of these people use e-GMAT. Why do I say that? When you look at the key stats on the leading forums, so GMAT Club or Beat the GMAT, you're going to come to a very similar conclusion. The key stats are, one is the number of verified reviews, and the second is the number of success stories posted over the last 12 months. Now, when you look at the number of verified reviews over the last 3.5 years, more verified reviews have been posted for e-GMAT than have been posted for all the other major leading prep companies combined. And again, you'll see a very similar story if you count the number of success stories over the last 12 months or so. Now, what makes our students more successful? There are many things, but if there's one thing that would stand out, it would be our approach to GMAT preparation. And to understand what are the differences, how our approach to GMAT preparation is different from the approach that many other prep companies take, let's look at the two approaches to learning or to learning architectures that exist today. If you look at the two architectures that exist today or are prevalent in the industry today, one is the classical book-based architecture, and the second is a private tutoring-based architecture. Now, most of the prep companies that exist today are built around this book-based architecture. Yes, they have audio-visual learning. Yes, they have assessments, but their predominant learning architecture or teaching architecture is still based on the classical book-based approach. When you evaluate e-GMAT against these two architectures, what you're going to find is it's based a lot more on the private tutoring-based architecture. Let's see why one architecture is more successful than the other in helping you get to a certain GMAT score. So let's take an example of someone who wants to go from a 600 to a 720 or higher score. So how do you go about doing it in an efficient manner? The first thing that you would really do is you'll create a path to that goal. So you'll figure out what are the major areas of focus that you need where you need to spend your time in. Then you need to learn all the concepts that you still don't know. Now, learning concepts isn't enough. You also need to learn how to apply those concepts, and you need to excel to a degree where you are among those top 6 percentile of students. So essentially, starting from creating a very specific part to that goal, to learning what you don't know, to learning how to apply what you don't know, and achieving that extent of mastery is what is needed if you want to get to a 720, 730, 760 odd score. Now let's see how a book-based approach tackles this problem, starting with study plans. Now, a book-based approach is all about autonomy. So when you start learning from books, you're going to get 2 or 3 study plans, and you'll have the option of choosing amongst those 2 or 3 study plans. These study plans are not personalized to you, or I would say are pseudo-personalized to you. And you have to make a decision as to which study plan out of the 3 or so given applies to you the most. Then you start learning concepts. Now, the books teach you concepts well. I mean, there are a good number of books that will tell you what an assumption is, that will tell you to a decent degree what a main point is. The problem is that when you learn that concept, that burden of validation as to whether you've learned the concept well enough or not applies entirely to you. One area where books don't do as great a job is teaching you how to apply those concepts. Just the very format of book, it's not very conducive to telling you this is how you approach step one while solving a sentence correction or a number properties question. This is what you do in step two. This is what you do in step three. And while giving a solution, it doesn't point out the step in which you faltered. And so people who study using books, to learn application, they resort to solving hundreds and hundreds of questions, and only the best and the brightest are able to master application. Similarly, to evaluate whether they're amongst those top 6 percentile of students or not, a lot of people who study using books resort to taking a number of mock tests. While mock tests do give them scores, the onus of evaluation is completely on you as to figuring out, hey, which are the areas that you did well in, which are the areas where you still need more effort. A private tutoring-based architecture works slightly differently. If you work with a good private tutor, the first thing that a good private tutor does is evaluates your strengths, figures out the areas that you still need to work on, and creates a study plan that's personalized to both of them. Then a private tutor would teach you concepts and would give you feedback on the areas that you still need to work on, where you haven't learned things well enough. One area where a private tutor makes the most difference is teaching you how to apply those concepts. A private tutor would not only tell you how to approach a problem in steps, but when you're solving a problem, he'll also tell you where are you faltering. So that precise feedback allows you to focus on improving those areas. And then while you're solving problems, a private tutor constantly evaluates your extent of mastery, and when you've mastered a concept well enough and mastered the application enough, he'll move you from one part to the other. So while you're learning the same content in both these architectures, the extent of personalization right from the study plans to the feedback that's given ensures that a private tutoring based architecture is a lot more successful in getting people to those 720 or higher scores than a book based architecture. Now let's see why is it that we say that e-GMAT is based around this private tutoring based approach, whereas most of these other courses are built around the book based approach. And we'll start with we'll take a use case of someone who wants to go from a 600 to a 720. It just so happens that this is a fairly common use case. And we'll start with creating your study plans. Now, how do we enable tens of thousands of people who work with us every year to create the study plans? We've built an AI-driven utility which empowers everyone to build their personalized study plan. What does this utility do? It takes your current quant and verbal scores, and then it would give you a recommendation. Now, since this is not a static utility, it's very aware of the information that you provide to it. So when you tell this utility, okay, you have a Q44 and essentially a V28, it understands that a Q44 implies that you know certain concepts, and a V28 has a certain implication to it. And in this case, even though both these scores are around the 50th percentile, a Q44 means that you know a lot more concepts in quant than you know in verbal. Accordingly, the recommendation that it gives you with regards to getting to a 720 emphasizes on quant first and then focuses on improving your verbal enough. Now, if you don't like it, you can obviously change this by clicking over here. But now that you've decided that you're going to aim for a Q50 and a V38, you still have to figure out how do you get to a Q50? How do you get to a V38? And to do that, this utility tells you the various ways of getting to a Q50 and the various ways of getting to a V38. And again, this is a neural network built in the backend, so you can look at the various options that are there. But let's say you decide that you want to aim for a uniform 83rd percentile in arithmetic and algebra, and on the quant side, and on the verbal side, you want to excel in sentence correction, do really well in critical reasoning, and then do above average in reading comprehension. So when this happens, your overall study plan goes from these starting abilities, which we have assessments to figure out where you guys are, to these ending abilities. It's not a black box. It's a set of 5 neatly defined milestones. Now, the next thing that you need to worry about is, okay, how do you get to these milestones? How much time do you need to spend on various sections? And depending on your starting and ending abilities, this utility then calculates the amount of time that you need to get to those milestones. So you can see the starting abilities on the left, the target milestones on the right, and then the amount of time that you need to spend per subsection. So again, you can see this, you need to spend less time on arithmetic because your starting ability is higher, and more time on algebra, even though the target abilities or the target milestones in both these sections are identical. So when this happens, your GMAT preparation becomes this. Starting from a starting ability of 50 percentile in sentence correction to about almost a 90 percentile in sentence correction. Similarly in CR and RC as well. And those are the abilities that you need to aim for, and not worry about that 720 score, because if you hit these abilities, you will hit that 720 score. The next thing that this utility does is gives you a day-by-day study plan. It takes into account how much time you can study on a weekday and how much time you can study on a weekend. And it'll give you a target GMAT there. It'll also tell you essentially, if you want to take a break, you can really put that information in as well. Now, why did we spend 1,000 hours building this thing? So that whereas most people don't do that, so that each one of you can create a personalized study plan in 7 minutes or fewer. Let's talk about learning concepts. Now remember, a private tutor would teach you concepts and gives you feedback on how well you're doing. The e-GMAT course is built around the same architecture. So what you see over here are video lessons, and this is a subject verb module in our sentence correction course over here, which teach you concepts. We built special technology which has evaluation within these video lessons. So when you spend about 20 odd minutes learning a concept, we give you an assessment which is built in there. We give you feedback that's personalized to you. Now, when you compare this to another popular course by Magoo, what you're going to find is, yes, this is an audio-visual course, but it's just lessons. There's no feedback built into it. The other thing you're going to find is that the extent of detail that you see is very different. I mean, you just see these two lessons which focus on subject verb over here. The next piece is telling you how to apply those concepts. Now, to do that, at e-GMAT, we build this entity called an application file. So you can see this with number 1 over here. In this, we tell you how to approach a problem in steps. What do you do in step 1? What do you do in step 2? What do you do in step 3? Then we give you practice on that, and we evaluate your ability to do that. And then we give you a set of targeted official questions. And again, so that you can apply the same thing, not just on e-GMAT questions, but on official questions as well. And this is how every module, we have over 100 modules in our courses, but this is how every module in Quant or Verbal is architected. Now compare this the same thing to the Magoo course. What you're going to find is that there is no application file. The emphasis on teaching application is not there separately. There's just one quiz at the end. Again, it doesn't give you feedback. There's no score over here. The goal is not to give you personalized feedback, but just to provide you with some practice. So now that you've had this study plan, now you've learned concepts, learned application, the question really is, okay, how do you ensure that you've achieved that level of mastery so that you get to that 90 percentile? And the reason why this is important is because when you're studying a subject such as reading comprehension or sentence correction, you're not studying it to just learn the concepts, you're studying it to achieve that 90 percentile mastery. And to make sure that you're able to evaluate yourself, we build this tool called Scholarium, in which you have ability quizzes in all aspects of verbal as well as quant. You can take a sentence correction ability quiz, it'll give you an ability score, but it'll also tell you insights on if you haven't reached your target ability score, which area should you go and revise. And in this case, it's very clear that this particular student needs to go and revise comparisons. And because of these insights, because of the quality of questions that we have in Scholarium, It is the world's highest rated assessment tool. If you go on GMAT Club, you're going to find it's rated higher than GMAT Club tests. It's rated higher than GMAT Prep mock tests. So you can really see while you learn the same content, the extent of personalization, the amount of application that you learn is a lot higher in a private tutoring based approach, and how e-GMAT is modeled around this. Now, who's built some of this content? 4 out of GMAT Club's top 5 rated instructors build this content, and instructors who've been reviewed a lot more frequently on GMAT Club. So while a good percentage of students, get to that 7, well, a good percentage of students want to get to that 720 score, those who actually get, a good number of them work with e-GMAT. We are starting we start a batch every 2 weeks, and we'll be starting our second batch of April next week or so. You can download the batch calendars over here. This is the quant batch that we'll be starting. You can really see it's fairly comprehensive. You start with 2 sessions in algebra, then we'll move on to geometry, then advanced topics such as PNC probability, then we'll go on to number properties and word problems, and then end with a quant workshop. This is designed for working professionals, so every session does take place on a weekend, and this is 7 a.m. Pacific time, which is 3 p.m. UK, 7:30 a.m. or 7:30 p.m. IST. This is the verbal side of things, again starting with critical reasoning, moving on to sentence correction, ending with reading comprehension, and then a proctored mock test and verbal workshop. With that, I've come to the end of my introduction. If you want to stay updated with all things e-GMAT, if you want to stay updated with all things that happen in the MBA world, you're welcome to connect with me on my LinkedIn. I have close to 10,000 or close to 11,000 students now connected with me on my LinkedIn. We post about 5 articles a week on various aspects of GMAT and MBA overall. So if you want to stay updated over there also, it'll be a great idea. With that, I'd now like to invite Payal to start the second part of this webinar. As we do this transition, I'm going to mute myself. We'll take about 50 to 60 seconds to do this transition. Now, thank everyone for being with me for this first part of the webinar. Now we'll start the core of this webinar, which is how to ace GMAT reading.
Good morning, good evening, and hello everyone. My name is Payal Tantan, and I will be your host for this second part of this webinar. And in this session, what we are going to do is understand what it takes to master reading comprehension. So before we go into the details of that, I'd like to understand what your current approach towards reading comprehension is. And for that, I'm going to be asking you a few questions. So the first question over here is, how many of you enjoy reading comprehension? By that, what I mean is that according to your study plan, when it comes that, okay, reading comprehension is the next section that you need to be working on, how many of you get excited at that prospect? So it appears that only about 1/3 of this class enjoys reading comprehension. Okay. All right. And this brings me to my second question, that why is it that you do not enjoy reading comprehension? And I'm going to get you a poll here in which you can type in your answers. What's the first thing that comes to your mind that indicates that that is the reason behind you not liking the reading comprehension section? Okay, answers are vague, too much information in short time. It takes too much time to read, technical topics and unfamiliar areas. Answers are all vague, cannot focus, big difficult text. Since I was a kid, always have difficulty understanding the meaning and purpose of sentence, sticking to the details of the passage. Okay. All right, attention span. All right, well and good. Now, another question that I have is how many of you experience the scenario in which you have read the passage, and in this case, you understand the passage really well, and you feel you get that confidence, and you're all excited about answering the questions, but when you come across the first question, you feel, oh, did I even read the passage that would be able to help me answer this question? How many of you have experienced that scenario? And in fact, this is a scenario in which you actually feel good after reading the passage and you feel that okay, you have understood it, but you again end up getting stumped when you look at the question. So almost everyone has experienced that scenario. Okay. All right, well and good. And all of this is very much in line with what we have seen session after session. People tell us why is it that they don't enjoy RC. Now I'm going to give you some more precise reasons, and I want you to tell me that what is the one reason that you can associate with. And again, you may be able to associate with almost all the reasons for in different capacity, to different extent. But I want you to tell me which is the one reason that you associate with the most. All right, let's look at what most of you have written over here, and we'll get a annotate the ones which the reason which is selected by most number of people here, by the largest group here. So answer choices are very close. About 37% of the class has selected this one, and this statement is actually selected by by more number of people in all the sessions across the board. That is something which I see across the board. Then 21% of the class has selected not enough time. And then the little bit of trailing thing is not enough retention and passages are too complex. Okay, so answer choices are very close is something which a number of you associate with. Okay, now it's very important. So first of all, thank you very much for your great response here. Now, one thing that I do want you to make sure that you understand is that yes, these are reasons that we have presented, but these may not be the real culprits here. The real culprit could be something completely different. And that is one of the key things that we need to make sure we understand as to what is the real culprit behind the problem that we are facing. Because till the time we don't understand we don't identify the root cause of the problem, any solution that we come up to solve that problem would not be it we may not be successful in solving that problem, right? So it's very important for us to identify the root cause behind that problem, and that is what we're going to be talking about in this session. And then once we have identified the root cause, we'll move on to figuring out how to solve that problem. Now tell me something. What is the difference between an active reader and a passive reader? When I tell you the terms active reader and passive reader, what do you think is the difference between the two? And the answer could be that I don't know as well. That is also fine. Just think about what it could be. Okay, I have 4 responses yet. I'm sure we can get some more people to think about and write what is the difference between an active reader and a passive reader. Okay. Active reader reads the question, then the passage. Passive reader reads the passage first. And unfortunately, that's not the right response, but thank you for the effort. Passive reader is disinterested. Absolutely right. Active reader, reading and memorizing it. Passive reading without knowing what you've just read. Partially correct. Active reader definition is not correct over here, but passive reader pretty much to the point here. A passive reader skims through the sentence or passage while an active reader tries to understand the sentence or passage. Absolutely right. Glazing over text versus understanding. Okay, sounds good. Um, Active readers are often involved in reading and passive does it on purpose. Not quite right, but I can see why you're saying that. Active reader, you understand what you are reading as you go. Passive reader, you're only reading the words, not retaining. Okay. Retaining is where I would have a problem, but other than that, the definition, the difference is pretty much on the spot. So thank you so much for your brilliant effort here. Now, the difference between an active reader and a passive reader is that an active reader engages with the text as he or she is reading the text, whereas a passive reader is simply reading through the words that are there in the text. So it's reading versus comprehending. An active reader is a reader who is there with an intent to understand each and everything that the author intended to communicate. Whereas a passive reader is simply there to read through the words without really focusing a whole lot on understanding. Okay. Now, it is this difference, the major difference between a person who aces reading comprehension and who struggles with it is actually comes from the fact whether you are an active reader or a passive reader. So, the moment you switch your mode of reading from being an active reader from being a passive reader into an active reader, you are going to see things happen as you interact with the reading comprehension passage that you see on your screen. You are going to see that yes, you are now able to understand what the author is saying. You will be a lot more interested in reading comprehension. Reading comprehension would no longer seem like that issue that you always face, like that sticking point in your verbal score. The only thing you have to do is understand how is it that you can become an active reader. And that is something which we are going to be working on in this session, because ultimately our goal is to help you ace reading comprehension. So the first thing that we're going to be focusing on is how do you get maximum from the passage in the first read itself? And that is possible by becoming an active reader. So essentially, we are going to be teaching you how do you become an active reader. And that happens by learning those reading strategies that help you become an active reader. And we'll then demonstrate these reading strategies through two small passages so that you can see these strategies in action. The second thing that we are going to be focusing on in this session is, yes, you've read the passage, you've understood the passage, but how do you use that information to answer the questions that have been posed? So we are going to be demonstrating a main point question and we'll be demonstrating an inference question. So one thing that I do want to tell all of you is that it's not that in this session we're going to be covering 2 or 3 full-length RC passages with 3 or 4 questions each. No, that's not the intent of this session. The intent of this session is to help you get that one method or that one trigger point which you can then utilize in order to ace reading comprehension. And for that, it is absolutely essential that we focus on understanding in a very short, in a limited space, and then we show you how you can solve questions utilizing that understanding so that you understand what is important to ace reading comprehension. Okay, so we'll be discussing two small passages. So I always mention that in this session just so I set your expectation right, because reading comprehension is apologize for that. Reading comprehension is associated with large amount of text, right? But that's not what we're going to be talking about. We won't be utilizing such large amount of text to prove our point, because it's a lot better to prove our point with a shorter passage, and that's what we're going to be doing. But what you'll see is you will be able to take the learnings from this session and very well incorporate those learnings into your study plan for reading comprehension, which is what we're going to be talking about towards the end of the session. Okay, so everyone with me so far? Because next we're going to go into our reading strategies, and for that I need everyone's 100%, or as I usually say, 200% attention. All right. Okay. Now, your journey to acing GMAT RC starts with having the right attitude towards RC. I know almost all of you are scared of RC. You consider it to be a nemesis. You consider it to be that one thing that stops you from getting that verbal score of 40 or that 750 score. Now, if you really want to get to that target score of yours, then you need to change this attitude. Okay. Now, what is this attitude that I'm talking about? You have to get immersed in the passage. You need to approach the passage with an attitude of an active reader. And what does an active reader do? An active reader immerses in the passage. RC is a game of mental attitude, and you need to get that attitude right. You need to tell yourself, if I'm taking the GMAT, then the passage that I see in front of me will definitely get me 4 questions correct. Answering those 4 questions correctly helps me move towards that 750 score, gets me closer to that admit to that dream school and that scholarship. That is what should motivate you to be invested in that passage. Okay. At that point in time, you shouldn't consider that passage to be a laborious, huge chunk of text that you are absolutely not interested in. A topic that you've never read in your life earlier, that you will probably never even bother about next time, beyond that, those few moments when you are taking the test. Okay, but that is what you need to change. You should not get worried at all about what you see on the screen. You have to train your mind to accept what you see on the screen. You have to train your mind to say, okay, don't be scared. These are just words, these are just some piece of information written to enhance your understanding. So absorb that information. Don't be scared of the stuff that the author has written. Consider author as your friend who just wants to have a conversation with you. Engage in that conversation. The minute you flip this switch in your mind, it's as simple as flipping that switch in your mind. You will see that everything starts to make sense. All the strategies that I'm going to be talking about beyond this attitude strategy are going to make complete sense to you. You will be able to absorb all those strategies really very well. It's almost that you are opening the gate over here, okay, so that you can absorb those strategies very well. Does this make sense? I know it may sound very philosophical, but believe me, this this single strategy can help you make or break can help make or break your RC performance. And this is something that no one can teach you, frankly speaking. It's an attitude that you have to get right on your own. It's the attitude that whatever you see on your screen, that is something which is of value to you. And that's why it makes sense for you to forget everything else in the world during those 10 to 12 minutes with that you're engaging with that passage. And at that point in time, when you see that RC passage, the only thing that matters in the world is that particular passage, is you and the author and what the author is trying to tell you. Just write these words down. Whatever words make sense to you in this context, just write those things down and just repeat that in your mind whenever you see RC passage. You're just training yourself. Okay, and as soon as you do that, everything else you'll have to put an effort for other strategies too, but those strategies will make sense. Those strategies will work if you are connected with the author. Okay. Now, as I said, no one can teach you how to get immersed in the passage. This is something that you have to train your brain. Okay, but I can assure you of this, that if you keep telling yourself that I want to get interested in what the passage, in what the author is saying. The author has spent so much effort in writing the passage. All I At least what the least that I can do is give the author those 10 to 12 minutes of complete attention so that I understand what he intends to communicate. Okay, any of these statements, whichever statements make sense to you, or whichever statements are close to what makes you get immersed in the passage, repeat those statements every time you see a passage. Okay, now once you get the attitude right, the reading strategies are what we're going to discuss next. And these reading strategies are going to come in very, very handy for you to comprehend what the author is saying. Now, one thing that I do want to mention over here is these reading strategies work only for passages that are written in appropriate manner, that are written according to the well accepted writing strategies. So if you try to apply these reading strategies on poorly written RC passages or poorly written chunk of text, you will not be successful. But the good news is each and every RC passage is a very beautifully written piece of text. So, and that's the beauty of an RC passage. It's a very, very beautifully written piece of text which has information in properly connected form. It's a logical flow of information, and whenever things are logical, you can apply these strategies so that you can understand the maximum from it. Okay, so our reading strategies are based on the writing strategies that GMAT authors follow in order to write the content that they write in their questions. Okay, and accordingly we do the same thing as well. Okay, we also write our RC passages in the same manner the way you see GMAT authors write their own passages. Okay, so this is one thing, that these strategies work beautifully on passages that are written in that logical manner. Now, what are these reading strategies? The first and the foremost is you understand the sentence structure. Now, this may come out as little odd for some of you, as to we are talking about reading comprehension. So, why does the sentence structure come into picture? Why do you think that's the case? Why am I talking about sentence structure? Why do you think I'm talking about sentence structure? Type in the short answer poll here. Yes, to comprehend well, but why sentence structure? Predict next set of information, that'll come in another strategy. No clue what this has to do with general information provided in the text. All right, how ideas are interconnected. Tell the tone of the author, not quite just yet. The sentence conveys the intent of the author. Okay. Well, if you think about it, what is the building block of an RC passage? Tell me, what is a building block of an RC passage? It's the sentence, right? You can say it's a sentence. However, think about this. Actually, let me ask you this question. How many of you have completed sentence correction or have done 50% of sentence correction preparation? In sentence correction, you see long sentences, right? And you have to break down those sentences in order to understand what the author intends to communicate. The same thing you need to apply in reading comprehension as well. In reading comprehension, yes, the smallest block, smallest entity is smallest unit is a sentence. However, a sentence is also composed of multiple ideas, right? So it makes sense to split that sentence into its smaller chunks, into its smallest unit, which is an idea. And that is where understanding sentence structure is so very critical. If you start to read the passage assuming that a sentence is the smallest unit, then you will end up missing out on a lot of information that the author has packed in that single sentence. Okay. However, on the other side, on the other hand, if you break that sentence into its smaller chunks, keeping in mind that an individual idea is the smallest unit in that particular sentence, then now you are understanding the idea and not just reading the entire sentence. And that's the whole idea of incorporating the sentence structure into your reading comprehension strategy. Does this make sense? Yes or no? In very simplistic words, instead of considering sentence as a building block of an RC passage, you're considering an idea to be the building block of an RC passage. And that's the reason why when you read a sentence, you don't just read a sentence from the starting of the sentence till you see the period at the end of the sentence. You break down that sentence into smaller chunks so that now you can understand what the author is trying to communicate through each of those chunks. And this is a strategy which is absolutely important for you to master. Wouldn't this be time consuming? Definitely yes. When you're learning the process, it is going to be time consuming. And I am going to be addressing the timing aspect after we discuss the reading. After we talk about reading strategies and after we discuss the first passage, I will definitely talk about that. But for now, just keep that aside. Okay. All of this will happen within the timing constraint that you are working with. Otherwise, we won't be here. Otherwise, I will not be here talking to you about about these strategies if these strategies did not work under the timing constraints of the test. Okay, so just keep that statement in mind, and then I'll definitely address the timing issue when we reach that point. All right. So this is the first and the foremost thing. The second thing is you predict thoughts through keywords. Now, what do I mean by that? Why do we need to predict thoughts? Okay, so let me take this question also. Do you recommend this on every sentence of the passage? Absolutely, yes. I recommend understanding sentence structure, breaking the sentence down into smaller chunks on every sentence. For that matter, any sentence that you read, whether it's an RC passage, whether it's CR passage, whether it's sentence correction, whether it's an article that you're reading, don't consider a sentence as the building block. Consider an idea as the building block. The minute you just switch again, this is also flipping a switch. You are considering an idea as a building block. So you understand idea bit by bit, right? Or all the ideas one at a time, and then you put them all together. And that's when your comprehension actually skyrockets. Okay. Because what happens is that if you are trying to read the entire sentence and understand the entire sentence in one go, there's a lot of overload of information on your head. Okay, and you're not able to connect the dots. You're not able to make sense. Why did the author say this versus why did the author say that? Okay, and again, I'm going to be demonstrating these strategies to you so that you'll be able to see these in action. So let's come to the second one, predict the thoughts through keywords. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by this is, as you're reading information, you need to be engaged with the passage, with the author. Now, the author has given the entire passage to you, right? So you may question me as to why do I need to predict when I know what the author is actually going to say next. The reason for that is for you to be engaged in the passage, for you to absorb what the author is saying in a lot better manner. Predicting almost serves as a primer. The whole point of predicting is the action of predicting serves as a primer when you are putting a paint coat after that, because the way a primer really helps paint stick better on the surface, the same way the action of predicting the next thought helps stick that next thought into your brain really well. And let me give you a very small example here. Let's say that that the author presented a positive aspect about a certain entity. And then he says, having said that, and then I want you to pause after that and I want you to tell me, if the author presented a positive aspect about a thing and then he said, having said that, what do you think is going to come next? something negative about that, right? A negative aspect about that same thing, or a negative impact about that same thing, something other than the positive aspect, right? Now, if you already know that what's going to come next is that negative aspect, then when you read that negative aspect, you are a lot more, you're welcoming that thought in a lot better manner. You are ready to absorb that thought in a much better manner. And when that happens, your understanding really improves. Okay. Now these are, imagine if you do this action for every piece of content that you're reading in an RC passage, imagine how much your comprehension is going to improve. You're almost in that conversation with the author, if you think about it. Yes, the author has already told you, has already given you his script, but you are pausing at appropriate points so that you can interact with the author. Does this make sense? Yes or no? And again, I'm going to be demonstrating all of this on 2 passages after I'm done teaching you all the 3 strategies. All right. The third strategy is summarize and predict what's next. And yes, you may ask me, why are there 2 predictions here? What strategy number 3 is about, strategy number 3 is really about predicting the thoughts in, so first of all, summarizing all that you've read in your own words, because when you summarize things in your own words, they stick a lot better, right? So you read a paragraph or a chunk of a paragraph, and then you summarize it in your own words, and then you also form an opinion as to what the author could say next. Now the prediction here may not always match the actual thing that the author does. Okay, because here you're not predicting based on a keyword, you're actually predicting based on the logical flow of the author, and you know, there could be multiple logical flows from one particular point. But the whole idea of doing this is, again, just to, it doesn't matter whether your prediction matches what the author is going to say next, or what the author says next. All this does is just make sure that you are connected with the passage. So really, this prediction over here helps you with your attitude issue, with your attitude wherein you want to be connected with the passage. It just helps you stay connected with the passage. No other reason for that. The only purpose that this prediction serves over here is that you are still connected with the passage. You're still connected with the author, and you're still in conversation mode with the author. Now, this prediction, on the other hand, really works for you to absorb that information a lot better. This prediction in second part over here with the keywords is precise, because you are basing it on the keywords and you're basing it on your understanding of what you've read so far. So this thing is precise. Whatever you predict would actually be the stuff that the author says. And this prediction helps with you with sticking this, with improving the comprehension. Okay, whereas prediction in step 3 helps you with maintaining your attitude of staying connected with the author. Okay, now I have an interesting question, and I haven't seen this question before. Do you recommend summarizing in English or your mother tongue? Actually, your mother tongue would be absolutely fine. The whole point of summarizing is, and thank you for bringing up that question, because it makes perfect sense that the whole point of summarizing information in step 3 is that that information sticks in your head. And if your mother tongue is, if you're more comfortable with your mother tongue, absolutely fine. Summarize that information in your mother tongue, because that summary is for you. Okay, so thank you, Mary, for bringing up that question. All right, so now if you think about it, the first strategy over here is on a sentence level, understanding the sentence structure. Let me get rid of all these annotations. Yeah. The second strategy is within a paragraph, right? Because it's within, it's between, let's say, 2 sentences, or maybe between 2 or 3 sentences. The third strategy here is within a paragraph as well as among the paragraphs. So it's not that you always have to summarize only at the end of paragraph. Okay, You need to summarize whenever you feel that there is an overload of information happening. Okay, so it's very important to summarize whenever you feel that there is an information overload happening. Okay, so that's why the third strategy can be done within a paragraph as well as among the paragraphs. Okay, all right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to apply these strategies slowly to improve comprehension. Yes, you read the word absolutely correctly. I'm talking about applying these strategies slowly. And I'm very sure that all of you would think GMAT is a timed exam. Why is she talking about doing things slowly? You will understand this. Right now, let's just focus on comprehension. Okay, and let me ask you one question. How many of you believe that comprehension is the key to reading comprehension? How many of you believe that? Almost everyone, except for 5 people here. I'm not sure why they don't believe that comprehension is the key to reading comprehension, to acing reading comprehension. Okay. Now for comprehension, okay, my next question is, how many of you believe that these strategies, the 3 strategies that we saw on the previous screen, that these 3 strategies will help with comprehension? Almost everyone. Okay, so it's my request to you to please keep the timing issue aside. And let me ask you that also. How many of you believe that it's not possible to do all of this within the timed constraints of the GMAT exam? About half of the, let's say 40% of the class. Okay. So for the 50% of the class who believes that all of this is not possible within the timing constraints of the test, keep your doubt aside for just the next 15-20 minutes, and I will address that doubt of yours. Believe me, as I said earlier, I wouldn't be here in front of you if these strategies did not work. They do work, and you will see examples of that. You will see actual students talking about that. You'll see why these strategies work. But first, let's just, because all of you agree that this is the way, first of all, comprehension is the key. Secondly, this is the way to improve. This way will definitely help improve comprehension. Then let's just give this way a shot, and then we'll talk about the timing aspect. Okay? Is that okay? Yes or no? Because if you give this a shot with that doubt in your head, you will not be able to give this a fair shot. Okay, so that's why just keep that doubt aside. I will definitely address that. Okay. All right, thank you very much. So now let's come to this passage. Okay, now one more. So the strategies that we talked about, those were more global strategies. Now there are certain tactical strategies as well to make your life easier, and one of which is, and we talk about 3 tactical strategies in the course, but one of the strategies that you will be able to apply in this session is shortening of technical terms. So whenever you see those unfamiliar terms in the passage, just shorten them up. Don't let them act as speed bumps as you're reading the passage. Okay, so shorten them up and move forward, and you will see why you will be able to apply this strategy right away on the next passage, on the passage that we see next. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the passage, and then I'm not going to time you. Okay, I'm not going to be putting a clock on your head, and I want you to read the passage, take down your notes in your notepad, okay, or in your scratch pad. And when you're done reading the passage, I want you to summarize your notes in this poll over here. Okay. I also want you to, so you don't need to enter your notes as you are reading them. When you're taking down notes, take down notes on your paper, on your scratch pad using your pen. But after you're done reading the passage, after you're done finalizing your notes, then you simply enter the summary of your notes here so that I can see what have you understood from the passage. Okay. Another thing, since I'm not timing you all, when you're done, can you all please click on no, because this just tells me that you haven't as yet read the passage. Clearly enough, I haven't shown you the passage, but just click on no over here. And then when you're done reading the passage, change your vote to yes, because that will, when about 60% of the class has read the passage, I'm going to show you the question. And then I'm going to give you a chance to answer that one question based on this passage. Okay. All right. So here you go. Very short passage. Good luck. All right. I'm going to show you the question next. Here you go. And I'm going to get you the poll as well. Last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So about 44% of the class has selected choice D as the correct answer. And then the next popular choice is choice C, and trailing very close to it is choice B. And very few people have selected choice A. All right. So, and thank you for putting in your notes. I'm going to end this poll here, but I'm definitely going to read the notes as we discuss this passage. Now, tell me, yeah, let me get the poll here. Were you able to apply the reading strategies? And how was your experience doing that? I see some yes, some no, not really. Okay. So what strategies were you able to apply? So when you're saying yes, tell me yes and partially tell me what strategy did you apply? Breaking the sentences, all right. Try to predict the outcome at the end. Shortening the terms, engaging and summarizing. Okay. Forgot when I started reading. That's absolutely fine. Summarizing, understanding the sentences, sentence structure. Okay, good. Very nice. So again, this is your first chance, first time that you have to apply, first opportunity to apply the strategy. So it's okay even if you missed missed applying it, or even if you forgot. So you'll have plenty of opportunities beyond this one. Okay, sounds good. Now, what we are going to do next is we are going to read the passage the way we recommend you read a passage, and just to make it so just to state that as a blanket statement. Whenever I read any sentence, any passage, regardless of whether it's in the GMAT context or otherwise, I always break down the sentences in this manner. Okay. Now I may be able to do it a lot quicker now because this strategy is very intuitive in my mind, but that has happened through years of practice, through years of just doing this over and over again. Not to say that you are going to take years. Within about 20 to 30 passages, you will be able to do this intuitively on your own. Okay, so I am going to now demonstrate these strategies to you in action. Bordering on the extreme, one definition. Now I read only till this part here. Okay, or maybe I extend it to this part here, bordering on the extreme, one definition of ethnocentrism. The first thing that I do is I shorten this technical term, ethnocentrism, as EC because it's just going to act as a speed bump. I don't know what this term means, so I might as well shorten it up as EC. Okay, so bordering on the extreme, one definition of ethnocentrism. Now I ask myself, what borders on the extreme? And so because I'm asking myself, I'm going to ask you now, what borders on the extreme? Is it the definition or is it ethnocentrism? Okay, it's not ethnocentrism, it's not EC, it is the definition that borders on the extreme. The author is not saying that EC is extreme. The author is saying that one definition of EC is extreme. Okay, that's what the author is saying right now. Okay, now bordering on the extreme, what does that mean? Now, what does bordering on the extreme mean by itself? It's not the overview, but what does it mean? Extreme view, yes. Yes, so what the author intends to say over here is that this one definition of EC is at one end of the range. Absolutely right. It's an exaggerated definition. It's an extreme definition. That's what the author is saying. Okay. Now let's read further. So what we know is that the author thinks that this one definition of EC is exaggerated. So would you agree that this is author's view? That this one definition of EC is exaggerated? Would you agree with that? Yes or no? How many of you agree that this is the author's view? It is definitely the author's view. The author himself is saying that this one definition of EC is an extreme definition. So it is his view. Okay, so again, as you see, we have read just about 7 or 8 words, and right now we already know that there is one definition of EC, which means that there are many definitions of EC that exist, but right now the author is talking about this one definition of EC. By the way, the author thinks that this one definition of EC is exaggerated, is extreme. So we have obtained so much information about EC, or about this definition of EC, in just these few initial words. Now we read further. One definition of EC considers it a schematic in-group out-group differentiation in which. So I'm just going to pause here because I know what is going to come after in which. Tell me that. What's going to come after in which? Explanation, absolutely right. Explanation of the differentiation, absolutely right. Now, because that's a detailed explanation, I can pause and let me just understand what the author has said till this point. So look at this where I am pausing. This is my second pause in this sentence, right? So let's read it further. One definition of EC considers it. Now, what does it refer to over here? What does it refer to? It refers to EC, absolutely right. So here I'm applying my knowledge of English, right? So one definition of EC considers EC a schematic in-group out-group differentiation. Now, how many of you know the meaning of the word schematic? And that's absolutely fine, because even if you don't know the meaning of the word schematic, all you can, for the sake of your understanding here, all you can say is some kind of in-group out-group differentiation. Okay, so some kind of differentiation. Okay, so some kind of differentiation. So one definition of EC considers EC as some kind of differentiation between what? Between in-group and out-group. In-group, out-group is very much understandable. People inside the group and people outside the group, right? In which internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, and devotion to the in-group are correlated with. So I pause here again. Okay, why? Because I first need to understand what each of these terms imply. In which internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, and devotion to the in-group. Now these 5 terms, how can you summarize these 5 terms in your own words? These are positive feelings towards people in the in-group, right? So love for your own people, that's what this is. These are all positive feelings towards towards the people inside the group, right? So love for your own people are correlated with, so all these positive emotions are correlated with what? Are linked with what? Are linked with a state of hostility toward the outgroups. Okay, so now this is my next pause point. Are linked with state of hostility, are linked with hatred towards the outgroups, which are often perceived. Now what does which refer to? Which refers to outgroups here, right? Which are often perceived as subhuman and or incorporation of evil. So now let me get rid of all these annotations here. So now, what do we know about this definition? About this definition, what it indicates is that one definition of EC considers EC as some kind of differentiation in which Love for your own people is linked with hatred towards outside people. By the way, these outside people are perceived as evil. Now, if you notice how I have summarized this entire sentence, this entire passage, now the passage itself is a single sentence here, but it's my summary. I'm not using author's words. In my summary, what I have said is that the author presents one definition of EC. This definition, by the way, is a bit exaggerated. According to this definition, these two things are correlated. Love for your own people is linked with hatred towards outside people. By the way, these outside people are evil. Okay, so what you see on the screen at the bottom is my summary of this particular passage. How many of you summarized the passage in this way or had this level of clarity of the passage? Okay, so about 20% of the class had this, 25% of the class had this level of clarity. Okay, not as detailed. Now, this is the level of detail which is absolutely important. Okay, I will not say that even if you had 75% clarity, it was okay. I will not say that because you need to have this level of clarity. Because the author is going to make, the test maker is going to make questions that are going to stump you if you don't have this level of clarity. Now, tell me one more thing. The way we read the passage together, did it seem very logical to you? Or did you, okay, so it seemed very logical. I'm going to ask another question. As I was reading the passage and as I was understanding it and telling you what I'm inferring from the passage, did you feel that anything that I did was out of your reach? So it's all doable, right? I mean, it's all logical, it's all doable. The only reason why you haven't been able to do that on your own till now is that actually two reasons. First one, you were never exposed to that. We are always, I mean, the way RC is talked about is that you have to do speed reading, you have to read fast so that you can get to the questions, you eliminate answers in the questions, you come back to the passage, you go back to the questions. It's just that we are always in that race whenever you talk about RC. RC is not about the race. RC is all about understanding. Take your time with the passage. Okay, that's why when I talked about the attitude thing up front, that's what I said. Connect with the author. Because if you connect with the author, you will be able to understand what the author is saying a lot better. And that is what is going to get you the questions a lot more accurately. Okay. All right. So now let's come back to this passage here. I'm going to ask you how many of you, so there are three things that we got from this passage, right? I'm going to ask you which ones you were not able to understand from the passage when you read the passage on your own. So select the ones that you were not able to understand or that were not included in your summary when you read the passage on your own. And you can select more than one. Okay, I'm going to broadcast the results now. Okay, so about 63% of the class was not able to understand, was not able to, let me get the correct one here, was not able to get this part here, that the definition is a bit exaggerated. About 35% of the class was not able to summarize the definition here, and very few people, 20% of the class was not able to see that it presents one definition of EC. Now let's talk about now these are pertaining to this particular passage. However, we can easily generalize this. If you think about it, the first piece of summary over here is given explicitly in the passage. The passage says one definition. So this part is given explicitly in the passage. The second piece of information over here in my summary is an inference that needs to be drawn. We have drawn this inference from the expression bordering on the extreme, right? So that's the inference. The third part over here, the third part of the summary is actually summarization of what you've read. Okay, so if you think about it, more people had issues with inferences than with summary, than with identifying the explicit detail in the passage. Okay, and this is something which I see in sessions after sessions. People don't draw inferences as they are interacting with the text. Think about it this way. Inferences are not just meant to be drawn when you see a question based on inference. You need to draw inferences as you are reading the passage. Okay, you need to be able to do that. Likewise, summarization is a very important skill. That is our third reading strategy, that you need to summarize information as you're reading it. So all of these skills, right now, the reason I'm telling you this is so that you understand what skills you need to build upon. Okay, and as you go through the e-GMAT course, e-GMAT RC course, you will see, as you go through the detailed solutions, detailed passage analysis, you will see how you will be able to build those skills simply by interacting with the course, simply by going through the course in the right manner. Okay. All right, so now let's come to the question itself. So I'll bring back the question poll here. Choice A. Now this is a main point question. So what we need to find out is, given this passage, what do you think the author wanted to accomplish? What was the goal of the author? What was the purpose of the author behind writing this particular passage here? So the first one is to criticize a concept that encourages hostility towards people not belonging to the same group. Now, this is an interesting choice. Why? Because starting of the passage indicates bordering on the extreme. So that particular word can very well be misconstrued as criticize, right? But that happens only if you don't understand in very clear terms what is the role of each entity in the sentence. Okay, so for those of you who selected choice A, you selected it because you didn't quite understand what is the role of extreme. You didn't quite understand what that bordering on the extreme is actually describing definition and not ethnocentrism itself. Okay, so choice A is wrong. Now let's talk about choice B, to evaluate the concept of ethnocentrism while enlisting its various features. Now, when you evaluate, what do you do? You analyze the pros and cons. You do the positives and negatives. Absolutely right. Now, for the 19 of you, which is about 20% of those who responded to this question, did you select and answer this question, yes or no? Let me get the poll. And this question is only for people who selected choice B. Did you select choice B because you saw certain positive features in the passage and certain negative features mentioned in the passage? So quite a few of you. Now, for those of you who did not select this choice because of those positive features and negative features, why did you select the choice evaluate? Based on comparison. I don't quite understand that. So, again, selecting the choice evaluate, selecting the choice that has the word evaluate in this, happens when you are superficially reading the passage. Okay, what has happened here is you've selected the word evaluate because on the surface of the passage you see that there are certain positive terms, loyalty, blah blah blah, and then there is a negative term that what was a negative term? State of hostility. So you consider those two groups of words as evaluation as positives and negatives. And that's why you end up selecting this choice. Okay, and this happens only when you are reading the passage superficially, when you're still skimming at the surface of the passage. Okay, and if you think about it, this answer choice is a very crafty choice. This choice is actually built on the assumption that students who mark this choice will be students who will not comprehend the passage really well, who are stuck at the surface of the passage. Okay, so with these each craftily made answer choice is actually based on the pitfall that the student is stuck on the surface. The student is not reading the passage as intently as he or she should be. Okay, so the test maker actually uses your inability to comprehend the passage against you by creating choices such as these. Does this make sense? Yes or no? Okay, and that's the reason why you have to read the passage carefully so that you don't fall in these traps. Okay, now the other aspect wrong with this choice is, while enlisting its various features, there is no feature mentioned of ethnocentrism. Just the definition of ethnocentrism has been presented, right? So that's another reason why this choice is wrong. Now let's look at choice C. Now choice C is a very interesting one, because if you think about it, this passage contains the definition, right? So because there is a definition, so it is likely that you will think, okay, maybe the intent of the author is to define the concept of ethnocentrism. But for choices such as these, wherein you can't just reject them right off the bat, what helps is that you get in the shoes of the author himself. Okay, and you think, if it was your purpose to define a concept, would you use the extreme definition in order to accomplish that purpose? If your purpose, take up any stream, take up something which you are an expert in. If your intent was to define a term from your own field, will you use the most extreme definition? No, you will not. You can introduce the term utilizing the most extreme definition or one of the extreme definitions, but you will not be able to accomplish your goal of defining that term if you simply use an extreme definition. Okay, so what you see over here is, to answer a main point question, I'm utilizing my passage summary, because from my passage summary I know that, okay, the author's intent, the author actually presented an extreme definition, and according to this definition these two things are linked, right? So you're utilizing your proper understanding of the passage to analyze each and every choice, right? And that's how such understanding comes into your aid in order for you to solve the question correctly. Okay, so this choice is also wrong. Another aspect of this choice of the another incorrect aspect is, which leads to hierarchy. There is no hierarchy being talked about in this session, in this passage, right? Now let's come to choice D, to introduce the concept of ethnocentrism by presenting a view on it. Now this choice is absolutely right. The author has presented a definition, which is an extreme definition. So you can definitely utilize an extreme definition to introduce a concept, and he has presented his view. He's presented his view by because he has said that this definition borders on the extreme. Okay. Now, for those of you who rejected, and more than half of the class rejected choice D, why did you reject it? My guess is so how many of you rejected choice D because of presenting a view on it? Yep. So this is another pitfall, because the author, the test maker here, the question maker here, again utilized your inability to comprehend bordering on the extreme to his towards this choice, because he knew that, okay, some of you will not be able to comprehend bordering on the extreme really well, and that's the play that he has used in creating this correct choice. Okay. Did not present a view, very short view presented. It doesn't matter whether it's a short view or a long view. I don't even understand what that means. What is important over here is that he has presented his opinion. He said that this definition is exaggerated. Okay, and that is a view. So again, the reason why you got this question wrong was not because you don't know how to solve main point questions. It was because you didn't have the complete understanding of the passage. Okay, and we all know that only about 20% of the class was able to get the first inference, which is that this is an exaggerated definition. Okay, so do you see how it all comes together? If you think about it, if you comprehend the passage really well, you will not fall into the traps that the answer choice creator creates for you, puts in for you, because you have that strong understanding of the passage. So comprehension is everything. At that point in time, now answer choices are very close. The minute you feel that after reading a passage properly and after solving the question, you feel that, okay, the answer choices are very close, I want you to not put answer choices are very close as the reason. The main reason why you felt that the answer choices are very close is because you did not understand the passage correctly in the first place. And that is why identifying the root cause of the problem is very, very important. Because if you continue to blame answer choices are always going to be close, because that's the whole point of the question. Okay, and you need to answer RC passage if depending upon what your target RC score is, right? You will if you want to score higher on verbal, you will need to be able to solve difficult questions in RC. Right? And in difficult questions, in medium difficulty questions as well, the answer choices will remain to be close as long as you don't comprehend the passage well. So, the root cause behind answer choices appearing to be close is that you don't have proper understanding of the passage. Okay, and that's the reason why you need to build on your comprehension skills. Is this point clear? Yes or no? Remember, identifying the root cause of the problem is the first step into solving that problem. And answer choices are very close is not the root cause. The root cause is that your understanding is not correct. Okay? All right. Now, let's come back to the passage. This passage was a difficult passage. Okay? Now, for those of you who answered the question correctly, very good. And you answered the question correctly for the right reasons, very good. For you, the strategies have started to work. For those of you who made a mistake, but you were still able to understand what was going on with the passage, the strategies are working. Don't give up, but you need to apply them and you need to learn from whatever mistakes you were doing. If you weren't able to identify the inference of exaggerated definition, then you need to make a note of that, and you need to be more careful when you are understanding information in the passage. For those of you who still don't have any idea as to what's going on in this passage, it's okay. This is the first time that you are interacting with such strategies. Give it your best shot. Okay, that's what I would say. As you go through the course, you will be able to understand how to apply these strategies. Okay, again, attitude is the most important thing. Okay, and having that confidence. So now what I'm going to tell you is, and it's very important that you hear from the people who have been in your shoes. Okay, it's one thing that I as an instructor tells you that, okay, I as an instructor tell you that, okay, these strategies work, but it's a whole different thing when you hear it from the people who have toiled through this process, who have faced problems the way you are facing problems. Okay, and that's why these stories are very, very important for you. Nishant was stuck at 690 because of his poor performance in RC. Okay, now this person went from 40 percentile ability in RC to 79 percentile ability in RC with the confidence that in his last attempt, in which he scored a 740, he would have gotten all RCs correct. Okay. Now, when you watch Nishant's interview, what you will find is that Nishant first faltered while applying the reading strategies. He applied them hurriedly. Okay, and frankly speaking, these strategies and hurry don't go hand in hand at all. Okay, now he would read a passage in 2 minutes and then jump to solving questions. When he did that, he had to reread the passage to answer the questions, and accordingly he faltered. So despite thinking that he was applying the strategies, he was taking 1.5 to 2 minutes per question. Okay, what he felt was that his understanding of the passage was not sound enough to help him answer the question. And that is when he, after learning from another successful e-GMATer, started applying the strategies slowly. Okay, something that we've been doing in this session. What he learned the hard way was that reading strategies are a means to the goal. Okay, so there is no point in rushing through them if the end goal is not being met. Once he changed his mindset and once he gave himself a good 4 minutes to read the passage, he was able to answer questions in 30 seconds each. That was the level of confidence and the power of comprehension. Okay, and this is what happens when I say that yes, it's a time test, yes, you need to apply these strategies slowly, and yet I say that you will not take more time to answer an RC passage as on a whole. This is what I mean. All I'm asking you to do is redistribute your time. How many of you take about 1.5 to 2 minutes to solve an RC question, not the passage, each question in RC passage? So what I'm asking you to do is move that time into your reading time of the passage, into your comprehension time of the passage. Spend 4 to 5 minutes on the passage by itself, because that is what is going to get you the right level of comprehension so that you can answer the questions in 30 to 45 seconds. And that's the theme that you're going to see across all the stories that I share with you in this session. Okay? Is this point okay for you all? The timing aspect. We are just redistributing the time. Now, because we are talking about the timing aspect, I'm going to say one more thing. The goal of redistributing the time is going to happen when you have mastered the process. Okay, I'm saying, so Nishant took 4 minutes to read the passage. I'm going to talk about other stories as well, and you'll see that they also took about 3 to 4 minutes to read the passage. But today, when you're reading the passage, you may take up to 10 minutes to read and understand the passage, and that's okay because you're right now building your skill. Okay, so at this point in time, I actually do want to ask you, let's address the whole timing thing, okay, because I want that elephant to be addressed, okay. How many, tell me about a recent skill that you have picked up? It could be recent, it could be some skill that you picked up in your childhood days. Tell me about a skill that you picked. Let's get some more skills. I have about 5 skills here, or 7. Driving, boxing, origami, playing the trumpet, learning a different language, riding a bike, pre-thinking from e-GMAT. Thank you. I like that. swimming, Latin dance, astronomy, okay, meditating, okay. There are two skills over here that I want to learn: Latin dance and meditation. Actually, marathon too. All right. Now, um, what now? So tell me, when you started learning these skills, okay, these individual skills, go back to your starting days. Were you at the same level of expertise as what you are today in each of these skills? Yes or no? No, right? You needed to practice. You needed to invest time so that you learned that skill. That was a skill that was alien to you. So you had to practice that skill, right? So why should comprehension not be any different? Why are we expecting that we will be able to apply, we'll be able to learn comprehension and be skilled in it right when we started to learn that skill? That's a wrong expectation, right? So consider comprehension, improving comprehension as a skill that you need to build. The minute you consider this as a skill and not as any trick or not as something which you should be good at automatically, the minute you start considering this as a skill, you will see that you are giving it the same due diligence as you did to all the other skills that you built for yourself. Is this point clear? Comprehension is a skill that you need to build. Okay, and you have all the tools in the e-GMAT course to help you build that skill. So don't set yourself up for failure by going through it quickly. Give it time to settle in. And here's my rule of thumb. About 20 to 30 passages, and I know that's a big range, but you have people with different kinds of starting points, right? Different levels of starting point. About 20 to 30 passages, you go through 20 to 30 passages in the manner that we go through in the course, okay, by applying those reading strategies. 21st or 31st passage that you go through, you will see that you've built the skill. Okay, and obviously then you have to stay in touch with it. It's not that when you learned how to play the guitar, you stop playing it and then you still was able to come back to it at the same level. No, you have to continually practice it. And again, that's very simple because you will take the GMAT rather soon, right? You'll be taking the GMAT within, let's say, 2 to 6 months of your starting to prepare for it. All right. So with this now, are you all ready for the next passage? Give yourself time to understand the passage, focus on each and every aspect in the passage, okay? So we'll do the same drill now. So click on no over here, telling me that you haven't as yet read the passage. And then I will get you the notes pane as well. Here you go. All right, I'm going to show you the question now. Now, this is a rather different kind of question because here I'm asking you to mark all the information, all the pieces of information that can be inferred from the passage. Okay, so again, this question can be very easily translated into what cannot be inferred from the passage. Okay, so again, it's a different kind of question, but it serves the intent of bringing across the point of how do you draw inferences or what is the right inference. So go ahead and solve this. Okay, I'm going to give you a small hint as you solve this question. Read each statement and understand from which part of the passage can that statement be inferred. Okay. Second thing that I want you to also think about is that look at, and this would be a pretty big hint, look at the information in the passage and tell, and also keep in mind who is saying that information or who is presenting that information or whose viewpoint is that. Okay, so pay close attention to that. An inference is always from the point of view of the author. Okay, so understand that, keeping that in mind and looking at the passage to understand who is saying something, whose viewpoint it is. Keep those two things in mind as you solve this question. Okay, so take your time, read each statement. All right, I've given plenty of time, so I'm going to end the poll. And here are the results. Okay, so let's go through the passage first and then we will talk about this question in detail. Now read this statement on the screen. The color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on the moods of people. So what can you infer from this statement? And select yes if you can infer statement 1, select no if you infer statement 2. So tell me, what can you infer from this statement? Okay. So about 64% of the class infers statement 1 and 35% of the class infers statement 2. All right. Now notice the word here is considered. What is considered tells you is that there are some people who believe that color blue has a soothing effect on moods of people, which means that the statement the color blue is soothing is not correct. You cannot infer this statement from what the author has said. It's an opinion, absolutely right. It's an opinion of some people, not of all the people. Okay, so when you say color blue is soothing, it means that the color blue is soothing as a matter of fact. Now, that is not the case because according to the author, this is simply a considered view of some people, which means some people believe that, which means there are some people who don't believe that. And if there are some people who don't believe that, then you know that it's not a fact because a fact is a universally accepted information. Okay? So it's very important whenever you're reading the passage, it's very important to understand whose viewpoint is being presented because the author takes up multiple roles when he or she is writing the passage. He can either take up the role of a reporter in which he's simply reporting information, or he can take up a role of an analyst in which he is reporting information as well as then giving his or her own opinion on it. Okay, so that's why you have to understand as you read each line of the passage whether the author is simply presenting someone else's views or whether the author is presenting his view as well. Okay, so now with this in mind, let's go through the passage. Ethnocentrism, EC, and its canonical variants and its variations are deemed to be intimately connected with xenophobia. Now, deemed to be intimately connected means what? That some people think that EC and its variants are very closely connected to xenophobia. What is xenophobia? Xenophobia XP. Okay. So, do you think that this is a fact that EC and XP are intimately connected? Based on this sentence, based on this part over here? No, it's not a fact. It's an opinion that of some people. Some people think that EC and XP are connected. Okay, so this is the kind of analysis that you need to do when you read the passage. Okay, now a complex attitude system cum sentiment structure involving aversion, dislike, and antagonism vis-a-vis the strange or the alien and everything that the stranger or the alien represents. Oof, this was a pretty long sentence, pretty long chunk over here. And I may have to read it twice, okay, because it was just a very bunch of heavy words put together. So I need to read it slowly. So for how many of you this happened? When you read this big chunk, you felt overwhelmed with the amount of information that was there in this chunk. And it's okay for this to happen, okay? When I say that you read the passage the first time and you get complete understanding, I don't mean that you can't, in that first read, you can definitely go back to the passage. You can definitely go back to a certain part of the sentence. Okay, that's absolutely fine. So here, when I felt that, okay, this was an overload of information, I went back to the starting point of that information and I read this slowly. A complex attitude system cum sentiment structure. So all this is saying is, it's a complex structure. Okay, and let me get my annotations as well. It's a complex structure, right? Involving aversion / dislike and antagonism. So involving hatred vis-a-vis the strange or the alien, towards the strange or the alien, towards the aliens, and everything that the stranger or the alien represents. Okay, so all this is saying is first of all, what is the role of this this entire part? It's a definition of XP. And what is the definition of XP? According to XP, it's a structure that involves hatred towards aliens and everything that the alien represents. Okay, that's about it. Now, would you think that this is a fact or an opinion? So tell me, is it a fact that what XP is, the definition of XP? Now, definition of XP is a fact. It's a definition, right? And it's not it's not an extreme definition as was in the previous case. This is a fact here, right? That it is what is XP? XP is a system, is a structure in which there is hatred towards aliens and everything that the alien represents. So it's a fact. Okay. Now let's read further. Some socio-cultural anthropologists, so some experts, even considered XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin. But, so I pause here. Now, some experts even considered XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin. So here, is this an opinion or a fact? That XP and EC are opposite sides of the same coin. Is this an opinion or a fact? It is an opinion. Absolutely right. It's an opinion of some experts. Absolutely right. Now, tell me and think about this very clearly. And this is where you have to link what you have read earlier. And I'm going to tell you something which will help you. My question to you is, why has the author used the word even? Okay. And I'm going to give you a hint. As you read the word even, think about what it says beyond this, that XP and EC are opposite sides of the same coin. And think about what the author has said earlier, that there are some people who think that EC and XP are closely connected. Now tell me, why has the author used the word even? I've given you quite a few hints here, right? But I want you to now draw linkages. So tell me, why has the author used the word even? Let's get a few more points here. Okay, so I would say there are some correct answers here, and I'm going to tell you what the correct answer is. The author earlier said in the beginning of the passage that there are some people who think that EC and XP are very closely connected. Now over here he's saying that there are some people who have taken it to the next level, who are saying, okay, they are not just intimately connected, they coexist. Opposite sides of the same coin always exist together, right? So absolutely right. Even more than closely connected, they're almost the same thing, or they always coexist. That is why the author has used the word even to show that, okay, not just there are some people who not just think that they are closely connected, they think that these are coexisting, that if one exists, the other has to exist. Okay? So connected are they that some have gone as far as to consider them sides of the same coin. Absolutely right. Now, this level of connection or this level of understanding is what you need to have when you read the passage. You need to be able to understand this. Why has the author used the word even? It's a very small word, right? But there is a reason why the author has put that word in there. Right, that word has been put in there so that you can draw linkages in the passage. The author first said over here that, okay, there is this group of people who think that these two are intimately connected. Now the author is saying, okay, wait a minute, it's not just that there are some people who think that they are not just intimately connected, they coexist. Right? And think about it. This is how you have those intellectual conversations with your colleagues, with your friends, with your family, right? You make a point and then you say, okay, no, it's not just that. There are some people who think that this thing actually goes further, like so and so. Okay, so again, think about this as a conversation. Think about reading the passage as a conversation with the author. Okay, and when you start doing that, you will start to enjoy RC. Okay, I used to hate RC, but now RC is one of my favorite sections just because there is so much information there. There's so many logical connections that I can make. It's an enjoyable experience. And it has become enjoyable experience only because I started to interact with the author. Okay, so again, it all goes back to your attitude. Okay, so let's come back to this passage now. So some sociocultural anthropologists even consider XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin, but now when you see the word but, you automatically know there is a contrast. But a few voices, so again, few other people have said that this need not be the case. Now, what is this over here? This is that this coexistence need not be the case. So again, you are making sure that you understand what this refers to. This refers to these two being opposite sides of the same coin. Okay, and you understood what does this mean, opposite sides of the same coin. You understood the meaning of even. Now, I can actually give you training on how to create an RC passage. You have 3 opportunities to create a question here. What is the significance of even? What does the author mean by opposite sides of the same coin? What does the author mean that this need not be the case? You have 3 different opportunities to create a question here. Okay, again, these are the ways, so when the author is creating a passage and the questions, the passage is being created keeping questions in mind. Okay, and that's what you have to, when you are reading the passage, when you're spending those 4 to 5 minutes on the passage, you're actually addressing so many questions, so many opportunities that the author has put in for himself to create those questions for you. That's the reason when you see the question, you already know the answer to that question. That's why it takes you about 30 to 45 seconds for each question for you to give the answer for each question. Does this make sense? Do you now understand why you have to spend this much amount of time in understanding the passage? Because I would say 70% of the battle is solved if you understand why the process works, or why is it important for you to go in such level of detail. Okay. All right. So now let's come back to the question that we have at hand. We need to answer the question that what can be inferred from this passage. So if you think about it, what the author has done in this passage is he's defined a new term XP. He says that there are some people who think that XP and EC coexist. Then he's given the definition of XP. According to the definition, it's basically XP is a structure that involves hatred towards aliens. And then he says, okay, there are some people who think that EC and XP coexist, but some people think otherwise. Now, the question at hand was that what can be inferred from the passage? Right? Now, what I would say is that the correct inference is always from the point of view of the author. Okay, that's something that's a given. An inference is always from the point of view of the author. Correct inference cannot be something on which the author has not given any opinion. If the author is simply presenting someone else's views, then that view in an answer choice cannot be the correct inference. Okay. Now, if the author presents his take on the view as well, let's say if he says that there are some people who think that EC and XP coexist, and rightly so, in that case, the author has given his agreement on that view, which means that that view can now be inferred because the author agrees with that. Okay. The third thing is that the author is a logical person, so he agrees with all the facts. Okay, so a fact that has been stated in the passage can definitely be, the information in that fact can definitely be inferred from the passage. Okay, so these distinctions, these characteristics of inference are what you should keep in mind when you're solving an inference question. Okay, now let's go through the passage, the answer choices here, and I'm going to bring back the poll here as well. XP and EC are different facets of the same concept. Okay, now this is the view of only some experts over here, that they're opposite sides of the same coin. So the skill that's required in an inference question is that you need to first understand where is this information coming from in the passage, right? So this information is coming from this part of the passage, that some people think, some experts think that EC and XP are opposite sides of the same coin. So that's another way of saying they're different facets of the same concept, right? So you first understand that. Then you say, okay, step 2 is Has the author said it? Has the author given his opinion on it? In this case, no. That means you can't infer the statement. Okay. XP entails dislike towards the strange. Now, where is this information coming from? This information is coming from the definition. It's just a summary of the definition, right? Simplified form of the definition. And this is a definition. Definition is a fact. Does the author agree with facts? Absolutely, yes, he does. So choice B can be inferred. Let's come to choice C. XP and EC are not connected with each other. Now, this is not even stated in the passage. So over here, again, but a few voices have cautioned that this need not be the case. You can say that, okay, this is a reword of this information comes from this part of the passage. Again, this is the view of only some experts, so it cannot be inferred. The canonical variants of EC are closely connected with xenophobia. Now, this part comes from the top, from the first line. That's your first step. Now, is this the view of the author? No, it's not the view of the author. So it cannot be. Has the author presented any opinion on this? No, he hasn't. So this cannot be inferred. In some cases, XP could be the cause of ethnocentrism. Now, there is no causal relationship listed in this passage at all. So this information does not even exist in the passage. So now tell me, answering this question, was it that difficult? Yes or no? Now that we've gone through the solution. It wasn't difficult at all, right? Very logical. Everything is very logical. All you need is the belief in the system, belief in your abilities, okay? Belief that you can get there. Those are the three things that you need. First of all, the confidence that it works. Secondly, the confidence that you can build this skill. Okay, those are the two things that you need. Now, again, you need to trust the process. That's what I said. Confidence in the system. Okay. Now, I have already talked about the timing aspect over here, so I'm just going to breeze through these slides here. The main thing over here, as we discussed, was that you have to redistribute the time. What happens today is that you read the passage quickly, you solve question, and just go through this, so just bear with me. Let's go through this slide real quick so that I can understand that you can appreciate what your current state is. You read the passage quickly, you come to question number 1, you read choice A, you go back to the passage because you're confused. You read choice B, you go back to the passage because you're confused. So on and so forth. You end up taking about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes on each question. And this carries on. Plus, there is that frustration that builds up that you're not getting anywhere. You feel so overwhelmed with the amount of information that is there in the passage and in the answer choices. How many of you go through this overwhelming experience when you go through an RC passage? Okay, almost all of you, or quite a few of you, about 75, more than 75% of the class. All of this can be avoided by you just spending more time peacefully on the passage. Because what that helps you with is that helps you with understanding what the author wants you to take on and then utilize that information to solve the questions. Okay, how many of you today read the answer choices hoping that you will find some clues from the answer choices? Okay, so I want you to write this down and understand this very clearly. The answer choices are not meant to help you. That's not their job. The answer choices are meant to derail you. Understand that. Okay, after all, think about this. GMAT is a test of logic. GMAT is a test of application. GMAT is a test to make sure that do you have the right skill set to understand information, okay, or to correct information in the case of sentence correction, or to analyze information in the case of CR and RC, right? So the answer choices are created with the intent to figure out, to identify people who are able to comprehend versus from the people who are not able to comprehend. That is the point of those answer choices. So those answer choices are not your friends during the test. Okay, your goal is to eliminate the answer choices, the incorrect answer choices. And you can eliminate the incorrect answer choices only by reading the passage completely, only by comprehending the passage completely. Okay? So now, if you spend more time upfront, what's going to happen is you'll have complete understanding. I've written 2.5 minutes, but this 2.5 minutes should be actually, can be anywhere from 2.5 minutes to 4 minutes to read the passage. Okay. Now, when you solve the questions, what you see is you can solve each question in under a minute. So it's all about redistributing the time. So believe me when I say this, RC is the easiest section to master. The only thing that you need to master RC is your confidence in the process, your confidence in the strategies, and your confidence in your skills. RCs can make or break your score. Now, this is a comeback story of a student who was unable to do well because of RC and eventually was able to ace the GMAT because she mastered GMAT RC. In her first attempt, she bombed her RC. I am among the most annoying grammar Nazis that you may come across, but each time I would come across an RC in the middle of my mocks, I would feel low and lose time and thereby end up rushing through my SC and CR questions as well. Okay, so she messed up her CR and SC because of RC. And then she changed her attitude towards RC. She decided to get immersed in the passage, and as she got immersed, she found comprehending easier. She was able to take good notes. She was able to get more and more questions correct. The strategy, while time consuming in the reading phase, it is time consuming in the reading phase, helped her improve her verbal score to V41, which is 94 percentile on verbal. In fact, this is exactly what Arjun did. Arjun took GMAT 3 times and he just could not improve his verbal score. He did everything that he could. For him, RC was his pain point. And in his final attempt, he applied the reading strategies. Okay. He did not do anything very different from what we have done in this webinar so far. He applied reading strategies and he focused on gaining complete comprehension. He stayed calm. He focused on learning. And this is not me as an instructor telling you. This is a student who has gone through the process himself, who has stumbled. Okay. I would really urge all of you to go through this video debrief. In fact, all the other debriefs as well in this session. He went from 40 percentile in verbal to 41, which is 94, which is 91 percentile in his fourth attempt. So this magic is possible, but there are no tricks, there are no shortcuts. You need to work diligently. You need to toil through the process. Now, I promised you that I'm going to give you a study plan. So here it is. The first thing that you have to do is you have to improve your comprehension, right? The second thing that you have to do is once you've improved your comprehension, okay, you understand what the passage says, but how do you use that to solve questions? So for that, you're going to learn different question types, okay? And then you're going to practice in the right manner, okay, so that you can enhance your skills. So how do you improve comprehension? So for this, we have these dedicated skill building exercises, okay? You have the master comprehension course in which you go through you go through a sentence, building blocks of a sentence. You understand where to pause. You need to understand how to summarize information. You learn all of that in the master comprehension course, okay? Then you have reading strategies files 1, 2, and 3 in your RC course. Okay, now in these files, we go through the strategies in the same manner as we went through in this session, so that we give you a chance to solve, to understand the passage, and then we ask you leading questions. As you solve those, you see what you were able to get and what you were not able to get, okay? And then we go through, if we have you practice the same skills in practice files 1, 2, and 3, okay? So essentially, you get 8 passages with rigorous application such that you understand how to comprehend the passage. Now, after you do that, we have these specialized concepts in which we teach you main point questions. How do you answer main point questions? For that, we have 2 concept files and we have 2 practice files for you to apply those learnings right there and then. Likewise, we have 3 concept files for inference. Today, I spent maybe about 2 to 3 minutes on that one slide. You have about 45 minutes of content just teaching you how to address an inference question. And then you have 2 practice files in which you solve inference questions. You have the same level of detail for detailed concepts and then for structure question types. So once you've learned all there is to learn about how to address these question types, now you need to practice, put it all together. And that's where the application files come into picture. That's where your ability quizzes in Scholaranium come into picture. Okay. So overall, you have more than 45 RC passages, okay, with uniform coverage across all the genres that are tested on the GMAT. So again, go through each of these steps step by step. First, comprehension, then learn the question types, then practice in the right manner utilizing Scholaranium. And for each of these, we have these specialized purpose-built modules to help you with each of these phases of your RC prep. Now here's another example of a student who made comprehension a habit. Anastasia is a person who took GMAT 3 times. She took private tutor the second time in Moscow. She could not improve. She took master comprehension to heart. And successful students do that. They build their foundation skills. She learned how to read to understand the meaning. She also made sure, as Arjun did, to read the passage only once. That is the power of reading the passage really, really well. Time to answer questions comes down since you are so clear about what the passage says. And I'm going to end this session with making this statement. And this is a very powerful statement. On the GMAT, speeding kills. So don't speed. Don't rush through the passage. All right, so with this, we've come to the end of this passage, end of this session. And I'm going to be inviting Rajat back into the session. But while he does that, I would want you all to tell me, give me your take on what you have learned from this session. So put in your feedback on the webinar and also tell me what you've learned from this session. So do both in this poll. And then I would also want to get your rating on the session because that tells me how well I was able to do my job. Because ultimately, if I do my job well, you will be able to do your job well. RC is not a ghost to fear. Very well. Very well said. I have learned everything I need to for RC. Good. I like that attitude. Eye-opening about speed reading. Good. I'm glad to hear that. What should I read to improve to make habit of reading for RC? Well, I would say just first go through the course. Okay, you don't really need to read anything else. Just go through the course and you'll see how your comprehension skill is being developed. You will see that. Okay. I believe now that I can also do it. That's the kind of thing that I like to see at the end of such sessions, wherein I feel that now you have things under control, that you feel that you can get there. And that is such a good start to my weekend because I know I've done something worthwhile at the beginning of the weekend itself. So I wish you all all the very best in your preparation. And I Hope to see your success stories, and I hope to conduct your success story interviews and maybe include those in these webinars for the future GMAT aspirants. Okay, so I'm going to go on mute just for a little bit. In the meanwhile, if you can put your questions in for Rajat over here, I would appreciate that, so that Rajat can come and take your questions when he joins. All right, I don't see very many questions in the Q&A pod, so I would really appreciate if you could put your questions here. Is AWA covered in the full GMAT course? Not yet, but I'll tell you one thing. As you go through the Master Comprehension course and as you go through the different verbal sections that we have, you will notice that your AWA skills will definitely be developed as you go through all the logical pieces in our course. So no, as of now, we don't have AWA covered, but I don't believe you would need a specialized course for that. One thing I find missing is what's with passages with 300 words? How can I have the time analyzing every sentence regarding structure, etc.? Chris, that's a good question. However, what I would think is, what I'm going to say is, again, understand the goal behind why we have to break down the structure. We have to break down the sentence structure so that we can understand the intent, the content of the passage. If you don't understand the content, you're not going to be able to solve the passage. Okay, that's a given thing. That's a fact. If you don't understand, you won't be able to solve. So you have to understand. So it's a skill that you have to build, which means that, and it's also a fact that people who build that skill are able to do it in the timely manner. All you're doing is you're redistributing the time. Okay. So don't worry about the passage length. Think about the end goal in mind. You've mentioned pre-thinking before. Could you brief on that? Pre-thinking is a strategy, is a very critical strategy that we utilize in critical reasoning section. Essentially, what pre-thinking is that you read the passage, you understand the linkages in the passage, and you think about, okay, what are the assumptions that the author has made in the passage? You're doing that level of analysis there. Okay, so you just pre-thinking helps with your understanding of the logic of the passage a whole lot better, so that when you answer the question, you have that level of clarity. That's what pre-thinking is. And our CR course is geared towards teaching you how to pre-think. What if we can't get meaning of a word in an answer choice? That's a good question. So meaning is inferring meaning of difficult vocabulary words is another tactical strategy that we teach in our course, in our RC course. So as you go through the course, you will experience content on that. So you would be able to build your skill in that aspect as well. But as such, GMAT is not a test which tests your super duper refined vocabulary. No. GMAT is a test to make sure that can you draw logical linkages. So you can definitely infer meaning of a very difficult word from the context of the sentence itself. Okay. Now, again, the good thing over here is you have such a varied amount of content, great content in the e-GMAT RC course, that even if you start off with a not so good vocabulary, by the time you finish the RC course and the Scholaranium practice associated with it, you will have built your vocabulary to an extremely good extent. Okay, so keep that in mind. When you come across a word that you are not familiar with, and when you go through the solution and it appears that this word was important in terms of solution, in terms of solving the passage, then definitely make a note of that word. Okay, when you go through the solution and you see that the solution has inferred the meaning of that word, then you learn that inference skill. Okay, so let's see what else we have. Okay, suppose first passage definition, then second passage tells lots of negative, and then in the last passage the author finishes with positive. Will it be positive or negative or neutral whole passage? Well, that's a good question. It depends on, I won't say that the passage is all positive or the passage is all negative or the passage is neutral. It's not that the positive and the negative cancels out. No. The passage will be that the author talks about, presents both positive and negative aspects. Okay, so overall it's not that the passage is neutral. No, cancellation doesn't happen. So the correct answer choice will encapsulate the entire essence of the passage, and here the essence of the passage is not that the author is neutral. Had the author been neutral, then he wouldn't have given his negative opinions or his positive opinions on the passage. Okay, if the author is presenting his negative and positive opinions on the passage, means that he is invested in that topic. So the correct answer choice should encapsulate that idea that the author is talking about the positive and negative aspects of this particular topic. But a good question. Please suggest whether we need to read news and articles to improve RC. It was also just suggested to remain updated, which will be later good to face interview. Well, those are two different intents here. Definitely for everything, it's very good to remain up to date with the current events and all that. That goes without saying, and not just in the context of GMAT. It is important for your overall development. In terms of whether you should read news and articles, definitely yes. Staying in constant reading habit, developing that reading habit is very much helpful. But I would say don't start reading right after the session. Okay, if you're not used to reading, hold off on that, on making that a habit right after the session. I would say first go through the course, understand how to read. So read in a more controlled environment. By controlled environment, I mean in the e-GMAT RC course environment, so that you're reading within the boundaries of the GMAT and you have the right kind of analysis that is being done in order to basically understand the passage, right? After you do that, then after you have made comprehension a habit, that's when you start exploring outside, if you don't already explore, right? So you look at New York Times, Washington Post, Economist. These are three very good news journals. So definitely look at that. Okay. So Nitish, I've already addressed the issue of vocabulary, so I hope that answers your question. How much time ideally is required to prepare for GMAT if I have written CAT before and scored around 90 plus percentile? That CAT and GMAT are not comparable, believe me. Regardless of how well you do in CAT, your performance in GMAT will not be determined by that, because these two are absolutely different exams. Okay, so I would say take up a mock test, understand where you're at right now, and then develop your own study plan according to that. Okay. What is the maximum time I can spend on long and short passages? So Prakhar, I would not really think about it in this manner. How I would think about is that how long do you need to spend in order to get that level of comprehension so that you can solve questions correctly. I want us to change the way we ask timing based questions. Okay. Timing is something which is very personal to you. Okay. And I know people are alien to that idea, because people usually go by the averages, that on an average for SC question you should be taking a minute to 90 seconds, for a CR question you should be taking 2 minutes, or whatever the case may be, right? But those timings are a lot more generalized. But your timing should be your own. By that, what I mean is you need to have, there is this concept of tuck time. What tuck time is, how much time you need to spend on a specific kind of question so that you can answer that question accurately. Okay, and that is something you get when you practice with Scholaranium. That's the information that we provide to you. For example, and again, the kind of differences that you can see uh, is something like this. Let's say you are able to answer, given how you have performed or given your skill level, let's say in sentence correction questions, let's say you can answer a parallelism based question accurately in under, let's say, in under a minute. Whereas for a modifier based questions, you may take longer, especially let's say a noun plus noun modifier based question, you may take up to, let's say, 90 seconds to solve the question. So you need to know what your abilities are. What is it that how much time you need to spend in order to get the question correct? Because ultimately, your goal is to get as many questions correct as possible. Okay, so yeah, so again, don't so change the way you ask the question about what's the maximum time you can spend on a question. All right, so yeah, I'm glad that you got this. Okay, so I don't see any other questions over here. So with this, I'm going to end the session and I'm going to share the batch calendars with you once more. And I'm going to share the session PDF as well. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us. Write to us at support@e-gmat.com or at payal@e-gmat.com. And once again, it was wonderful conducting this session with you all. You were very, very interactive and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And all the very best for your preparation. So give me just 1 second here. Also, tomorrow we have GMAT quant workshops, so definitely register for that if you want to know where you are at in your quant section right now. So this quant workshop is going to give you exactly where you're at, and it's going to give you a very detailed study plan as to how to get to your target score in quant. And then next week, we were talking about pre-thinking right now. So next week, Rajat would be going through the details of what it takes to learn pre-thinking so that you can answer CR questions with utmost ease. So definitely register for both the sessions right now.